All right, well, let's take our Bibles and turn to Psalm 44. Psalm 44. This is a psalm of lamentation, and specifically, this is a national lamentation. You know, there was a time, even in our country, that because of the shared beliefs and values, if you will, that when a part of us, a part of our nation may have been hurting, then the rest of us suffered along with. Now, I think that that's begun to even get better. Now, in my day and age, when I was younger, usually what I would see is when bad things happen in other parts of that's terrible. That's not, But it wasn't until probably the last 10 years that when we started to see really bad things happening, like say, for example, Katrina. It just seemed like there's some rallying around. Back when the planes hit which would go back even further than that, so 15 to 20 years, you begin to see that there's a national camaraderie that really didn't exist, and sometimes we have to fight to see, is it really there, because we're so divided in our country. And so here you have a nation who is actually getting to the point where we don't know exactly what happened, but it most likely was a defeat in their army, amongst their armed forces, and ultimately they're having to come together, and they're literally lamenting over that. Jeremiah, you had your hand up. Was there something you wanted? Yes, Psalm 44. Mm-hmm. So here we see this lament, and if you're taking notes, write this down, 2 Chronicles chapter 20, and then beginning in verse 4. 2 Chronicles chapter 20 and verse 4. This kind of gives us puts a little flesh on the concept here of what we're going to be discussing here in in chapter 44 of Psalm. So 2 Chronicles chapter 20, beginning in verse 4. So Jehoshaphat lived in Jerusalem. I'm sorry, that's chapter 19. So Judah gathered together to seek help from the Lord. They even came from all the cities of Judah to seek the Lord. Doesn't that sound like a great concept? What if every representatives of all 50 states of the United States came together to seek the Lord? What a great concept, right? Verse 5, Then Jehoshaphat stood in the assembly of Judah in Jerusalem and in the house of the Lord before the new court and said, O Lord, the God of our fathers, are you not God in the heavens? And are you not ruler over all the kingdoms of the nations? Power and might are in your hand, so that no one can stand against you. Did you not, O our God, drive out the inhabitants of this land before your people, Israel, and give it to the descendants of Abraham, your friend forever? They have lived in it and have built you a sanctuary there for your name's sake. Should evil come upon us, the sword or judgment or pestilence or famine, we will stand before this house and before you, for your name is in this house, and cry to you in our distress, and you will hear and deliver us. Now, behold, the sons of Ammon and Moab and Mount Seir, whom you did not let Israel invade when they came out of the land of Egypt. They turned aside from them and did not destroy them. See how they are rewarding us by coming to drive us out from your possession, which you have given us as an inheritance. Oh, our God, will you not judge them? For we are powerless before this great multitude who are coming against us, nor do we know what to do, but our eyes are on you. In fact, if you're there, I would just underline that word, our eyes are on you. Now, as we look at, just with that as a backdrop, let's take a look at Psalm 44. If you're taking notes, first and foremost, number one, we see God's past faithfulness. God's past faithfulness. You've heard me discuss this before as you see in the book of Genesis and in the book of Exodus. Constantly people were raising up monuments or altars. And the intention was that should anyone ever come and say, hey, why is this built here? It would give the children of Israel, or some representative there, an opportunity to say, we erected this monument because this is what God did for us. You know, the beauty of all of this is that I think it's interesting that outside, there was a time when Joshua and the people were supposed to go across the Jordan River, and they not only built up an altar on the outside of the river, but they built an altar inside the river. And I said this a long time ago in a message when I preached that in before mankind, as well as all creation, there's a testimony that God is faithful to His people. And so we raise up these monuments. Can you stop and think about in your own life? Maybe a little monument. Lay out some kind of a benchmark. Something that you can actually look back and put your finger on and say, God was faithful. God was faithful. And in those times when you are discouraged and when you are hurting and when it seems like things are the worst, those are the times when you can look back and say, God was faithful then. And He is the same God yesterday, today, and forever. He will still be faithful regardless of what happens. So God's past faithfulness. Look at chapter 44 and verse 1. He says, "O God, we have heard with our ears. Our fathers have told us the work that you did in their days and in the days of old." Moms and dads, grandma and grandpa, let me ask you something. Do you testify to God's faithfulness in your life? And I'm not talking about just, oh, well, our kids have experienced it, they've seen it. No, do you tell them? Do you remind them? I think about Joe at this point in time. Joe, God has been faithful. He's going to be faithful even now. And you can, in any situation, God has been faithful. I think, and I was sharing with Thad yesterday about, and you guys have heard my testimony about when we came from Albemarle and how God actually, He literally took care of us. Hundreds of dollars in the moments when we did not have any money, any income whatsoever. Go to the mailbox. We get a check for $900, another check for $600. And it would just go on, and this went on for weeks. How God would provide for us, and I've shared with you about how when our kids, we didn't tell anybody what was going on. But word got out, and all of a sudden teachers, Christian teachers of the church that we were attending at that time, started to put our kids on the list for Christmas. And my kids can tell you right now, I told them, I said, you have never gotten a Christmas like you've had this year. And never will you ever get another Christmas like this. This is God who is lavishing His love upon you in such a major way. Mm-hmm. And so these are opportunities to look back and say, do you remember how God was faithful to us? He will always remain faithful again. Verse 2, you with your own hand drove out the nations, then you planted them, you afflicted the peoples, and then you spread them abroad. Quick question, do you give detailed accounts of God's faithfulness to you? This is one of the reasons why I encourage you. Get you a journal. Write it down. Reason why is because we don't have that great a memory. Now, we might remember the situation. Oh, God was faithful to us. Remember that time in Albemarle when God really ministered to us? But then, what about the details? The details are important. Because the details can easily be overlooked. Count your blessings. Name them one by one. It'll surprise you what the Lord has done. Do you give detailed accounts of God's faithfulness? Look at verse 3. By their own sword they did not possess the land, and their own arm did not save them. Speaking of their fathers, forefathers here. But your right hand and your arm and the light of your presence, for you favored them. Do you stress to your children, to your loved ones, those whom you are giving testimony to the faithfulness of God, do you stress the importance of God's involvement in those times? I sit there and I look back, man, those days when we lived in Albemarle, I don't know how I could have provided for my family at that point in my life. And if God did not do something, We'd have had to eat the kids or something, I don't know. But in that time, I mean, it's just like, if God did not intervene, it just wouldn't have happened. Mm-hmm. Guys, this is important. This is extremely crucial for us to remember. God's past faithfulness. But second of all, we see that God is a source of our triumphs. And that goes right along with what we saw in verse 3 there. And that last point. God's involvement is necessary. And so God is the source of our triumphs. Look at verses 4 through 8. You are my king, O God. Command victories for Jacob. Through you, we will push back our adversaries. Through your name, we will trample down those who rise up against. I mean, are you starting to get a pattern here? Mm-hmm. It's through you, God, that this circumstance that I am coming through, that I will prevail. It is through your name, O God, that I have victory. He goes on to say, for I will not trust in my bow, nor will my sword save me. But you have saved us from our adversaries, and you have put to shame those who hate us. In God we have boasted all day long, and we will give thanks to your name forever. You see that word Selah? It's time to meditate. It's time to think about those particular things. This is going to be extremely important in just a moment. I'll tell you why. But let me ask you this question. Does the Lord's past faithfulness bolster your faith? See, that's what it's designed to do. God has been faithful. He will be faithful again. So, the question is, does the Lord's past faithfulness bolster your current faith? Write this down. 1 John chapter 4, verse 4. 1 John 4 and verse 4. I want to just read it to you. John says to the church here, you are from God, little children, and have overcome them, because greater is He who is in you than he that is in the world. Right? 1 John 5, 4. So 1 John 4, 4. 1 John 5, 4. For whatever is born of God overcomes the world. And this is the victory that has overcome the world. Our faith. Again, does the Lord's past faithfulness bolster your current faith? Yeah. Write this down. Psalm 33, verses 16 to 17. Psalm 33, 16 to 17. The king is not saved by a mighty army. A warrior is not delivered by great strength. A horse is a false hope for victory, nor does it deliver anyone by its great strength. Remember that one of the things that God told the kings and warned them about is not to put all their trust in their military prowess, their military power. And there were some kings, what did they do? They beefed up their military beyond what God said was necessary. And they basically were saying, we're not trusting in God, we're trusting in our own chariots and our horses and different things like that. What would happen? In spite of their might, they fell flat on their face. One more verse, write it down. Psalm chapter 20 and verse 7. Psalm 20 and verse 7. Some boast in chariots, some in horses, but we will boast in the name of the Lord our God. So, God is the source of our triumphs. Now, as we go into these next few verses, you're going to think, what just happened? Did somebody else walk in the room and take over the conversation? What in the world just happened here? Well, we see now the lament. So we talked about this being a national lament. And what does it mean to lament? The word lamenting or lamentation is a crying out, even to the point of uncontrollable crying out. And here now we begin to see the lamentation of the nation that they experience. Whereas verses 1 through 8, it's almost like, well, this doesn't sound like lamenting. It's more of a praise, right? Mm-hmm. But notice here in verses 9 through 16 the present distress. The present distress. Look what he says. Yet you have rejected us. What? You've rejected us.
God, you're so faithful. You've done so wonderful. Your name is to be praised, and we trust in only you and not anything else. Why have you rejected us? You know. Yet you have rejected us and brought us to dishonor, and do not go out with our armies. God, we can't win a thing. You cause us to turn back from the adversary, and those who hate us have taken spoil for themselves. You give us as sheep to be eaten. Boy, that puts a word picture in your mouth, doesn't it? How many sheep go out fighting the wolves? Don't happen. That's why they need a shepherd. That's why they need to be penned in. That's why they need to be protected. But you give us as sheep to be eaten and have scattered us among the nations. You sell your people cheaply. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in great need in your life and you're thinking, well, you know what? We don't really drive that car anymore. Let's see if we can get a good price out of it. And it just, you don't tell anybody how deeply in need you are, but then all of a sudden it's like everybody knows you're desperate. And you try to sell it for $2,000, but guess what? You're only going to get $900. Right? Listen to what he says. You sold us cheaply, and you have not profited from the sale. Now, what'd you get out of this? What is the point, is what the nation is basically saying. This lamentation is, what is the purpose of what I'm going through? What difference could this ultimately make? Have you ever felt this way, guys? Have you gotten to the point in your life, it's like, God, I don't understand. Well, it gets even better. Watch this. Verse 13. You make us a reproach to our neighbors, a scoffing and a derision to those around us. You make us a byword among the nations, a laughingstock among the peoples. All day long my dishonor is before me, and my humiliation has overwhelmed me because of the voice of him who reproaches and reviles, because the presence of the enemy and the avenger. Now, hold on to these thoughts here, and we're going to pick right back up. But let me ask you a few questions. We see in verses 9 through 11 this feeling of abandonment. Have you ever felt like God has abandoned you?
Yep.
Has your circumstance or your trial been so bad that you felt like God has completely turned his back on you?
Yep.
Let me ask you this question. What is currently distressing you? What is currently distressing you? Don't answer, but I do want you to let's just pause for a moment and think about it. What is causing you distress? Do you feel forsaken by God? Israel sure did. In verses 12 and 13, you see that they felt betrayed. Let me ask you this. These are feelings of betrayal. Do you feel that God has sold you out? That's pretty strong words, isn't it? That Israel's saying. You sold us. You didn't get anything out of it. Do you feel as though God is causing the pain without purpose? Verses 14 through 16, you see that the nation felt humiliated. Feelings of humiliation. I'm sure I don't even have to ask, but you guys have probably felt humiliated in your life, haven't you? What about now? Anything you're going through right now, you feel extremely humiliated. Do you relate to the psalmist's descriptions here? A byword amongst the nations. That word byword, basically, whenever your name is mentioned, it drums up negative connotations in other people's minds. Derogatory. We got an emoji that you can use. We don't even care. There's nothing good about this person and whatever they're going through. Yeah, I feel that.
But he began, he's broken.
Wow. That's a good picture. Thank
We
you.
got some big city, come on one side of the street, cross over to the other. Stop doing that.
Wow. So I mean, that's not a good feeling, is it?
No, it's, and you don't realize it when you're in the middle of it
Yeah.
until you look back. It's like, oh my God, where was I?
Wow.
And it's like, I didn't believe in God, I didn't believe in anything.
That's powerful. Thank you for sharing. That's amazing. But think about it. This is how Israel is feeling. Same type of situation. Israel, that great nation of God. You know. What about us? You know, oh, you say you're a Christian. Yeah. If you're a Christian, the woods are full of, you know, whatever kind of thing. So, byword of laughing stock. The word's there. Laughing stock. You ever felt like you were the laughing stock of everybody? Do you feel like a reputation has been created specifically for you? I feel special. No, I don't. But you've been given a reputation. People don't respect you. You feel humiliated. People reproach you. They find it difficult. You find it difficult to relate to people. Now, young people, maybe you feel like school is like that. Maybe school can be that way. Me, I was not an outgoing person. I felt alone a lot. And because I didn't like the way other people acted, and I didn't always like my own situation. I always felt alone. But you find it difficult to relate with others. Here in verses 17 through 22, you see the bewilderment of this nation. This nation is completely confused. Aren't we God's chosen people? We don't understand why we're going through it. Now listen, this is where it gets, I guess, intense. Because let me ask you this question. Have you ever, in the middle of your circumstance or in the middle of your problem, ever said, God, I'm trying my best to do everything right, and yet I'm still getting hammered?
Yep.
Listen to what he says. All this has come upon us, but we have not forgotten you. God, you've forgotten us. But I've not forgotten you. I'm still going to church. I'm still singing the hymns. I listen to Caleb. I'm listening to, I hang around people of God, and what do I have to do to get some relief here? All this has come upon us, but yet we have not forgotten you, and we have not dealt falsely with your covenant. Isn't that what was important, God? Our heart has not turned back. Our steps have not deviated from your way. Yet you have crushed us in a place of jackals and covered us with the shadow of death. Wow. Verse 20, he says, if we had forgotten the name of our God or extended our hands to strange God, would not God find us out? For he knows the secrets of the heart. But for your sake, we are killed all day long. We are considered as sheep to the slaughter. So, question. Does it seem like you try to do everything right, but you still get hit? See, these are feelings of failure. These are feelings of abandonment. They're feelings of total isolation. Because a nation that is named by their God is known for their God. Just like he has said a moment ago, God, you're the one who has delivered us in the past. Your name is great. And yet we're called by your name. And yet, look at us. Was this all worth it, God? Was it all worth it? The people say here that sin is not the cause of our distress. And literally he's saying, if my problems were because I had turned my back on God, wouldn't it be obvious? See, read the book of Judges. You read the book of Judges, it became very obvious to the people that they had turned to other gods. Read Nehemiah. and see Nehemiah weeping for his nation and calling out and saying, God, we have sinned. But for these people, they're saying, we really don't deserve what we're going through. We don't deserve the losses. We don't deserve the failure. If my problems were because of sin, wouldn't I know about it? You say, well, sometimes we can sin and we don't know. No, not if you're saved. I think that the Holy Spirit. Now, I think there's some things we can overlook from time to time, and we can grow cold to. But ultimately, for those of us who know Christ as our Savior, when we sin, we grieve the Holy Spirit. And He lets us know. You may be saying, I'm trying to do what is right, but there seems like no way out. Ask yourself this question: how do you recover from this? You know, Heather, you're talking about your coworker, and I'm just like, what do I say? What do I say when someone feels like this?
Oh, I do.
Here's what's frustrating: there's no answer. There's no answer in this song. It's not there. Let me take that back. There is the answer, but it's not the one we're looking for. Hold on. How do you recover from something like this? How do you move forward? That's what we want to know. Now notice in verses 23 and 26, here's the desperate plea. And here lies the answer. God, I don't understand why we're going through this. I don't understand how it can be. What is making this so profitable? What purpose could this serve? Well, no answer, but here's what they do. They still call on God. Here's your answer. Arouse yourself. Why do you sleep, O God? Now, let me ask you this question. Does God ever sleep?
No.
No. In fact, write this down. Psalm 121. Let's turn here for a second. Because you need to remember this. Because, folks, this is the times when you encourage yourself. When the circumstance you find is so just desperate. And you want to, maybe you're pious enough to never utter it with your lips, but your mind is going through it. We've all been there. God, are my prayers not making it above the roof? Am I not getting through to you? Are you asleep? All right, Psalm 121. Listen to this. I will lift my eyes to the mountains. Where shall my help come from? Here's the answer. My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to slip. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun will not smite you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will protect you from all evil and will keep your soul. The Lord will guard you. You're going in or going out, and you're coming in from this time forward and forever. Now remember, when we read these passages, this is written in poetic form. And so the promise that is there, or at least the principle or the characteristic, is that ultimately the people of God will not fail. But we may have to go through times when it looks like we've been failing. Think about Job. He had 3 friends, didn't he? So to speak, friends. They were the smartest men in the world when they sat there and grieved with him. But as soon as they opened up their mouth, the wisdom went out the window. And they spent more time blaming him and accusing him of his sin. And this is the reason you're going through all that you're going through is because of what you've done. Now, folks, I don't know about you. I know when I fall short, I don't really like it when somebody says, here's the reason why. You know, it's not the most heavy, but Job, and according to even this nation, did nothing to deserve what they're going through. So, that's Psalm 121. Seems like you're slumbering, Lord. No, he's not. He neither sleeps nor slumbers. How do we come out of this? How do we come out of the situation? And if you're taking notes, write this down. Number 1, remember what God has done in the past. That's really the simple part of it. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it's enough. And I know it sounds trite, and somebody wrote a song, but seriously, folks, remembering what God has done. There is no answer. There's nothing that Israel is getting from God that says, hey, you just hold on and everything's going to be okay. But they instinctually, at least from what they have been taught and what they have learned in the past, they're holding on to what victories they had, and they're literally remembering. So guys, whatever frustration that you find yourself, I encourage you, look back at the times when God was faithful. Look back at those times when God has been faithful. Shore it up. Hold it up. Write you a sticky note. Put it on your mirror. Because when you feel like not getting out of bed the next morning or whatever, because it is so heavy on your heart, go back and see where God has been faithful. Surround yourself with God's truth. Because ultimately, folks, His truth, especially those teachings, those things, there are those precious promises that God gives us. That's exactly what Peter even says in 2 Peter chapter 1. These great and precious promises. That's what you hold on to. So, number one, remember what God has done in the past. Second of all, replace your feelings with faith. Replace your feelings with faith. Faith comes by what?
Hearing.
Hearing. And hearing by what?
The Word of God.
Word of God, Word of Christ. Okay? So replace your feelings with your faith. And you see there in verse number 23, God, I think you're asleep. Psalm 121 says that our Lord neither sleeps nor slumbers. Look there on in verse number 24. Why do you hide your face and forget our affliction and our oppression? Does God literally hide His face? Does He turn? Well, write this down. Psalm 34, verses 15 to 18. Psalm 34, verses 15 to 18. Let's go back there and look real quick. Let's just read that. Psalm 34, verse 15 and 8 to 18. The eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous. I think sometimes, especially when the struggles that we face, problems we find ourselves when we do sin, we don't feel very righteous, do we? And so sometimes we might think from the standpoint that this verse would not really cause us much comfort. Because, hey, if God's eyes are toward the righteous, if His ears are bent toward those who please, then I've fallen short and I'm in. So this doesn't involve me, or it does not. I can't claim this. But folks, here's where proper theology is extremely important. Who did the Father say that He was pleased with? At the time when Jesus was being baptized, came up out of the water, the heavens opened up, a dove descended, and He says, this is what?
My Son.
My beloved Son, in whom I am
Well
well
pleased.
pleased. Do you understand that everything you have from Christ is because God consented to give it to you? All because of Him. That's why those in Christ we have this. In Christ we are this. In Christ all through the New Testament. That's so important. Because that's who we really are. In spite of how we feel, in spite of even our sin, because you look at Romans chapter 2, we have grace that is greater than our sin. So the righteous that He turns His eyes to is not because of your righteousness. Because even in Isaiah, what do we find out about our righteousness? It's His what? Filthy rags. So who's righteous? Who is He turning to? He's turning to the people whose righteousness God has placed upon them. That's good theology. All right. Back to verse 15. He says, the eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous, and His ears are open to their cry. The face of the Lord is against evildoers to cut off the memory of them from the earth. The righteous cry, and the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Lord, it seems like you turned your face away. Psalm 34, 58. And then in verses 25 and following, he says, for our soul has sunk down into the dust. Our body cleaves to the earth. In my mind, the picture that I get is one who's been completely abandoned, left for dead. God, it seems like you've left us here for dead. Write this down. Psalm 37, verse 24. Psalm 37, verse 24. Notice what he says here. When he falls, well, let's go back to verse 23. The steps of a man are established by the Lord, and he delights in his way. When he falls, when who falls? Well, this one whose steps are established by the Lord. When he falls, not if he falls, folks. There's no perfection here. You think you can get up from here tonight and you think you can live your life right and perfectly from here until you're destined for failure. Because you can't. So when he falls, he will not be hurled headlong because the Lord is the one who holds his hand. Precious. That's mighty, folks. When you fall, because it's going to happen, God is still holding our hand. So, Lord, it seems like you've left me for dead. Write this down. Psalm 55, verse 22. Psalm 55, verse 22. I think this is what Peter remembered in 1 Peter 5:7. Listen to what the psalmist says. Cast your burden upon the Lord. He will sustain you. He will never allow the righteous to be shaken. Lord, it seems like you've left us for dead. Psalm 55:22, Psalm 37, verse 24. This psalm of lamentation, at first, seems like praise and glory to the Lord, and then it takes a sharp left turn. So bad you feel like you got whiplash. and this praise turns into blame. But then ultimately, even though God does not answer. By the way, let me ask you something. Does God owe us an answer? So a lot of people think he does. God says, my ways are not your ways. So God does not owe us an answer. But here's what God has provided. He's provided his grace, which is sufficient for every need. Paul, think about Paul, 3 times asking God, remove this thorn that's in my flesh. My grace is sufficient. For my power is demonstrated in your weakness. No answer. But ultimately the answer is keep going back to God. Remember what God has done for you in the past and replace your feelings with faith. Let me just tell you something, folks. In those times, that's all that matters. You will see your faith grow exponentially. When you can trust without seeing what's coming around. Any questions or thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
I just will share more of an observation, I guess. Because at first, I'm like, this psalm's completely backwards. You know, supposed to complain first and praise later, you know.
Right.
But then that very last verse, rise up and be our help and redeem us. I like the fact that it's very bold, because in the New Testament we're told, to go boldly.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really neat how even,
Peter says that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because of what Christ did, we can boldly
go,
before the throne of God make our petitions known. Yes, ma'am.
So when you said that God doesn't always answer, wouldn't not answer when they could have answered?
Well, yeah, you're right. Because you've heard me say that before. God always answers his prayers, or answers our prayers. Either it's a yes, or it's a no, or sometimes it's a wait. I mean, it's really kind of where it is when it comes to, so yes, so his silence is an answer. But in other words, like I said, it's not always the answer we want.